Hollow Creek, a place where time seems to stand still and the fog rolls in like a thick, mysterious blanket every evening. A small town hidden away from the hustle and bustle of the modern world, a place where secrets are buried deep and the past lingers in every shadow. Nestled between hills and shrouded in mist, Hollow Creek is a town that holds its breath, waiting for something to happen. The hills seem to whisper ancient tales, and the mist cloaks the town in an eerie silence. The old folks whispered about its past, dark secrets, forgotten stories. They spoke of times when the town was different, when strange things happened that no one could explain. Their voices were hushed, as if afraid the very walls might hear them. But life went on, slow and quiet. The townsfolk went about their daily routines, their lives a series of repetitive motions, until Anna Belle arrived. Her presence was like a ripple in a still pond, disturbing the calm surface of Hollow Creek. The Montero family didn't know anything about those secrets. They were newcomers, seeking a fresh start in a place that seemed peaceful and serene. Little did they know they were stepping into a web of mystery and intrigue. They had just moved in, their hopes high and their hearts full of dreams. The house they chose was old, with a history that seemed to seep from its very walls. Their house stood at the edge of town, a big old house with an overgrown garden and an air of forgotten grandeur. It was the kind of house that seemed to watch you, to hold secrets of its own. With a dusty attic and a creaky porch swing, the house was a treasure trove of hidden corners and unexplored spaces. Every creak and groan seemed to tell a story. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret. Clara Montero loved to swing on that porch swing. It was her favorite spot, a place where she could dream and imagine. The swing's gentle creak was a lullaby, a song of the past. Clara was 8 years old. She loved dolls. To her they were more than just toys, they were friends, companions in her solitary world. Each doll had a name, a story, a personality. She had a whole collection, dolls of every kind, each one carefully chosen and cherished. They lined her shelves, a silent audience to her daily life. Big ones, small ones, porcelain ones. Each doll was unique, a piece of art in its own right, but none of them were like Anna Belle. Anna Belle was different. She was an antique, with eyes that seemed to follow you, and a presence that was almost palpable. Clara felt an instant connection to her, as if the doll had been waiting for her all along. Little did she know, Anna Belle had a story of her own, one that was intertwined with the very fabric of Hollow Creek. Clara found Anna Belle at a flea market. It was a bustling place, filled with the scent of old books and the sound of people haggling over prices. Clara loved exploring the market with her mom, always on the lookout for hidden treasures. On this particular day, something caught her eye. She was tucked away in a dark corner, almost as if she was waiting to be discovered. The doll's porcelain face peeked out from behind a stack of old records, her dark eyes glinting in the dim light. Clara felt an inexplicable pull towards her. The old woman selling her looked nervous. Her hands trembled as she held the doll out to Clara. $5, she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara's mum paid quickly, not even bothering to haggle. The doll was beautiful, almost too beautiful for such a low price. She had porcelain skin and long black hair that cascaded down her back in perfect waves. Her dress was made of delicate lace, and her tiny shoes were polished to a shine. Clara was mesmerized by her new doll. Her eyes were dark and shiny, almost lifelike. They seemed to follow Clara wherever she went. It was as if the doll had a soul of her own, a secret life hidden behind those glassy eyes. Clara named her Anna Belle. She whispered the name softly, as if it was a secret between the two of them. From that moment on, Anna Belle became Clara's constant companion. From that moment on, Clara was inseparable from Anna Belle. She took her everywhere. To the park, where they played on the swings together, to the grocery store, where Anna Belle sat in the cart, watching the world go by. Even to bed, where Clara would fall asleep with the doll tucked under her arm. Clara's mum started to feel uneasy. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was something about the doll that made her skin crawl. It was as if the doll was always watching, always listening. There was something about the doll, Something strange, something not quite right. The way her eyes seemed to follow you, the way her expression seemed to change ever so slightly when you weren't looking. It was unsettling. But Clara loved Anna Belle. She would talk to her for hours, sharing her secrets and dreams. To Clara, Anna Belle was more than just a doll. She was a friend, a confidant. So her mum kept quiet. She didn't want to take away something that made her daughter so happy. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Anna Belle than met the eye. She decided to keep a close watch, hoping that her unease was just her imagination. Strange things started happening around the house. Things would go missing, then reappear in odd places. Clara's mum could hear whispers at night, coming from Clara's room. One night she went to check on Clara. Clara was fast asleep, but the doll was gone. She found Anna Belle on the porch swing, swinging gently, as if someone was pushing her. The next morning, Clara's mum told her dad about the doll. He laughed. He said she was letting her imagination run wild. But deep down he felt it too, a shiver down his spine, like someone was watching him. Clara loved to talk to Anna Belle. She told her all her secrets. She confided in her. One day, Clara was playing in her room. She looked at Anna Belle. The doll's eyes seemed different. They were glowing faintly. Clara blinked. The glow was gone. That night, Clara had a nightmare. She dreamt about Anna Belle. The doll was alive. She was talking. But her voice was deep and raspy, not like a child's voice. Clara woke up with a gasp. She was terrified. The doll was lying next to her. Its eyes were wide open, staring at her. Clara's parents were worried. They had never seen their daughter like this before. Clara, once a lively and cheerful child, had become a shadow of her former self. Clara was pale and withdrawn. She refused to eat, and her once bright eyes were now dull and lifeless. Her parents tried everything to cheer her up, but nothing seemed to work. She wouldn't go near the doll. The doll, Anna Belle, had been her favorite toy, but now Clara seemed terrified of it. She would scream and cry whenever it was near. Clara's mom knew someone who could help, Mrs. Dalver. She was an old family friend, known for her wisdom and mystical abilities. Clara's mom hoped she could provide some answers. She lived at the edge of Hollow Creek, in a small, secluded cottage surrounded by ancient trees. The place had an eerie yet comforting aura. People said she had the sight. Mrs. Dalver was known in the village for her ability to see things others couldn't. She'd helped many families before, and Clara's mum hoped she could help them too. Mrs. Dalver came to their house. She arrived with a serious expression, carrying a small bag filled with mysterious items. Clara's parents greeted her with a mix of hope and desperation. She took one look at Anna Belle and gasped. The doll's eyes seemed to follow her, and a chill ran down her spine. She knew immediately that something was very wrong. "This doll is a vessel," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, but the weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Clara's parents exchanged worried glances. An evil spirit is trapped inside it. The revelation sent shivers down their spines. They had heard stories of haunted objects, but never imagined they would encounter one themselves. Mrs. Dalver tried to cleanse the doll. She performed an ancient ritual, chanting words in a language long forgotten. She sprinkled holy water and burned sage, hoping to drive the spirit away. But it was no use. The spirit was too strong, resisting all her efforts. Mrs. Dalver's face grew more and more frustrated as she realized the gravity of the situation. "The spirit is too strong," she said. Her voice was filled with a mix of fear and resignation. Clara's parents felt a sinking feeling in their chests. What could they do now? "You need to get rid of the doll." But how? Mrs. Dalver explained that the doll had to be taken far away, to a place where the spirit could do no harm. It was the only way to protect Clara and their family. With heavy hearts, Clara's parents prepared for the journey. They drove to a remote location far from their home and buried the doll deep in the ground, hoping it would never be found again. When they returned home, Clara seemed to improve almost immediately. Her colour returned and she began to eat again. The fear in her eyes slowly faded. replaced by the spark of her old self. Clara's parents embraced her, feeling a sense of relief and hope. They knew they had done the right thing, and with Mrs. Dalva's help, they had saved their daughter from a terrible fate. Mrs. Dalva smiled, knowing she had once again used her gift to help those in need. She left the family with a final warning: always be cautious of the unknown, for it can hold great power. From that day on, Clara's family lived happily, always remembering the lesson they had learned. They were grateful for Mrs. Dalva's warning and the second chance they had been given. Clara's dad took Anna Belle outside. He built a bonfire. The flames roared. He threw the doll into the fire. They watched as the flames consumed it. But then, something strange happened. The fire died down, right in front of their eyes. And there, in the ashes, was Anna Belle, untouched. Her eyes glowed red. Clara's dad was speechless. Clara's mum grabbed his arm. They had to do something, and fast. They needed stronger help. They called Father Miguel, the priest from the church in town. He arrived with his Bible and holy water. He examined Anna Belle. He could feel the evil radiating from the doll. "This entity is powerful," he said, "but I will not let it harm this family." Father Miguel began the exorcism. He chanted in Latin. He sprinkled holy water. The house shook, windows rattled. Clara's parents held each other close. They were terrified, but they had faith in Father Miguel. The chanting grew louder. The air crackled with energy. Suddenly there was a blinding flash of light, then silence. Father Miguel collapsed. He was exhausted, but he had done it. The spirit was gone. Or was it? Anna Belle lay on the floor. Her eyes were closed, but Clara could swear she saw them flicker, just for a second. Father Miguel told them to bury the doll, deep in consecrated ground. They did as he said. They prayed the evil would never resurface. But some things are not so easily buried. Some evils linger, waiting, watching. The end